The first explosions shook the ground like an angry giant's roar. Smoke rose over the jungle horizon, curling into the bright sky as birds scattered in panic. She crouched low in the shadows of the tall roots, her feline ears twitching at every sound. Her people were losing. The enemy was stronger, faster, and had more soldiers. Yet the elders kept repeating the same thing. Wait for the human. Her name was Sarika, a warrior of the Red Tail clan. She had fought in many battles before, but this one felt different. The enemy had brought their entire army. Thousands of armored beasts with glowing red eyes were closing in. The ground trembled beneath their march. Her warriors fought with courage, yet every minute they were pushed back. Sarika's claws tightened on her spear. If the human did not arrive soon, there would be no one left to save. From the smoke, a strange figure appeared. He was tall, wearing black battle armor that shimmered in the sunlight. His face was uncovered, his eyes calm, his step steady. The enemy did not even notice him at first. He walked through the chaos as if none of it mattered. Sarika narrowed her eyes. Could this really be the human they spoke of? He looked ordinary, yet there was something in the way he carried himself, like a storm waiting to be unleashed. A roar echoed across the battlefield as the enemy noticed him at last. 3 massive warriors charged at him, their armored claws ready to tear him apart. Sarika expected the human to dodge or run. Instead, he stepped forward and struck. His weapon was not a blade or a spear. It was a metal rod glowing with blue light. In a single motion, the first enemy fell. Armor split open. The second was thrown backward as if struck by a giant's hand. The third did not even have time to scream before the human's weapon crushed him to the ground. The Red Tail warriors stopped to watch. Even the enemy seemed frozen for a heartbeat. Then the human moved again, faster than her eyes could follow. He weaved through the enemy lines, striking with precision. Each attack was final. No wasted movements. No hesitation. Sarika's chest tightened. She had seen great fighters before, but never anything like this. The human fought like he had already decided the outcome of the battle before it even began. The enemy tried to overwhelm him. They surrounded him with 20 at once. He did not slow down. A flash of blue light swept through them, and the air filled with the sound of metal shattering. Bodies fell one after another. Sarika realized he was not just strong. He was breaking their will to fight. The enemy soldiers began stepping back, fear replacing their rage. It was the first time she had ever seen them retreat. Then, the human did something unexpected. He stopped fighting and stood still, his weapon resting against his shoulder. The battlefield grew silent except for the crackle of fires and the distant cries of the wounded. The remaining enemy warriors looked at him, then at each other, and finally began to run. The Red Tail warriors, still stunned, let them go. Sarika stepped out from the shadows, her heart still racing. She had just watched one man turn an army into fleeing shadows. As the dust settled, the human turned his gaze toward her. His eyes were not cold like she expected. They were steady, warm, as if he had been looking for her all along. She felt her grip on the spear loosen. For a moment, the chaos of war seemed far away. He walked toward her with the same calm steps he had used when walking into battle. She did not move. When he stopped in front of her, she realized her life had just changed forever. The campfires burned low as night settled over the jungle. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and wet earth. Sarika sat on a fallen log, her spear resting across her knees. Around her, the surviving Red Tail warriors whispered about the human. They spoke of his strength, his speed, and the way the enemy had run. She stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the dark edge of the camp where he now stood. He was cleaning his weapon, each motion slow and deliberate. The blue light that had flashed so brightly in battle was gone now. In its place was a dull metal sheen, as if it was only an ordinary tool. But Sarika knew better. She had seen how it tore through the enemy armor like it was made of paper. She wondered if he carried such power all the time or if it was something he could call upon when needed. When he noticed her watching, he gave a small nod. It was not a smile, yet it felt like one. She rose and crossed the camp toward him. Her steps were careful, not out of fear, but out of respect. Up close, she could see the lines of exhaustion on his face. He was not untouched by the battle. There was a cut above his brow and dirt on his cheek. Yet his eyes held that same steady calm as before. "You fought well," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the words carried in the still air. He looked at her for a moment before answering. "So did you." His voice was deep, unhurried. It was not the voice of a man trying to impress. It was the voice of someone speaking only truth. She felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Respect, yes, but also curiosity. The elders approached then, their long cloaks brushing the ground. They bowed slightly to the human, a gesture rare among her people. "You have saved the Redtail clan," one of them said. The human shook his head. "No, I just made sure you could save yourselves." His words were simple, yet they carried weight. Sarika saw the way the elder's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to understand the deeper meaning behind them. They asked him where he had come from, but he gave no details. He said only that he had been nearby and had heard the fighting. Sarika doubted that. No one simply wandered into the middle of such a war by chance. Still, she said nothing. His reasons were his own. What mattered was that he had stood with them when no one else would. Later, as the camp grew quieter, Sarika found herself walking to the river's edge. She needed space to think. The moonlight glimmered on the water, casting silver light across the surface. The jungle was alive with soft sounds, night birds calling, insects buzzing. She sensed him before she heard him. He stepped out of the shadows, moving silently despite his armor. For a moment, they stood without speaking. "You don't trust me," he said. It was not a question. She met his gaze. "I trust what I saw today." His expression did not change, but she thought she saw a hint of approval in his eyes. "That's enough," he replied. They stayed there for a while, neither feeling the need to fill the silence. The river's gentle flow was the only sound between them. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer. "The enemy will return. They don't accept defeat easily." She nodded. "Then we'll be ready." He gave a short glance toward the camp. "I can help with that." Her tail twitched slightly, a sign of interest she did not bother to hide. She realized then that his fight with the army had only been the beginning. Whatever came next, he meant to stand with them. The morning broke with a thin mist curling over the camp. The fires had burned down to embers, but the warriors were already awake. Sarika was among them, tightening the straps on her armor. She had not slept much. Her mind kept replaying the way the human had fought. It was not only his skill, but the way he moved through the battle as if the outcome had already been decided. The human stood near the edge of the clearing, speaking with the elders again. His armor had been cleaned, but the scratches and dents still showed. He wore them without shame. To Sarika, those marks were proof of his courage. As she approached, she caught fragments of their conversation. They were planning the defense for when the enemy returned. He spoke with quiet authority, never raising his voice. Yet everyone listened. When the meeting ended, he motioned for her to follow. They walked toward the riverbank, where the trees grew tall and close together. The air smelled of damp leaves and fresh water. "You know these lands," he said. "I need to see the paths they will use to attack." She nodded and led him through a narrow trail. Birds scattered from the branches above as they passed. The jungle seemed to close in around them, but she knew every turn. After a while, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. From here, she could see the scar of the previous battle, the churned earth, The broken weapons, the dark stains left behind. The human studied the land in silence. His eyes traced the hills, the river bend, and the thick forest beyond. Then he pointed toward a gap in the ridge. "That's where they'll come next time," he said. She knew he was right. They spent hours marking positions, placing signs only the red-tail warriors would understand. He showed her ways to slow the enemy without direct confrontation. Trap points, narrow passes, hidden firing spots. She watched him work and realized his skill went beyond fighting. He thought like a hunter, patient and precise. Every choice he made seemed part of a larger plan she could not yet see. When they returned to camp, the warriors gathered around as he began explaining the new defenses. He used simple words, clear gestures, and even drew lines in the dirt to show the movements. Sarika noticed how quickly her people understood him. There was no arrogance in his teaching, only the focus of someone who wanted them to survive. By the time he finished, even the youngest warriors stood taller. Later that day, they trained together. The human moved among them, correcting their stance, showing how to strike and withdraw. His movements were smooth, controlled, and deadly. When he sparred with Sarika, she found herself pushed to her limits. Every attack she made, he countered. Every opening she left, he used. And yet, he never struck harder than needed. There was respect in the way he fought her. After the training, they sat near the river again. The sun was setting, casting orange light over the water. She handed him a flask of water, and he accepted it with a nod. "You learn quickly," he said. She gave a faint smile. "You teach well." For a moment, the air between them felt different. Lighter, she caught herself studying the lines of his face, the way the light reflected in his eyes. She quickly looked away. Night fell, and the camp settled into quiet. The human did not rest. She saw him sharpening his weapon by the firelight, his gaze distant. Sarika wondered what he was thinking, but she did not ask. She knew some warriors carried their battles inside them long after the fight had ended. Still, she felt certain about one thing. When the enemy returned, they would face more than just the Redtail clan. They would face him. The next morning came with a chill in the air. Mist drifted low over the jungle floor, wrapping the trees in pale ribbons. Sarika rose early, her muscles still sore from training. She moved through the camp quietly, watching the warriors prepare for the day. They sharpened weapons, checked armor, and reinforced the defenses the human had taught them to build. The air was tense, but it was no longer filled with fear. Now, there was purpose. The human stood at the far side of the camp, adjusting the straps on his black armor. It caught the dim light of the morning, reflecting faint glimmers. His expression was calm, but his movements were quick and efficient. Sarika joined him without speaking. She did not need to ask what they were doing. Today, they would patrol the outer trails, making sure the traps were set and the paths were clear for their scouts. They moved in silence for a long while. The jungle was alive with sounds, distant calls of unseen creatures, the rustle of leaves, the faint splash of water where small streams crossed their path. The human's eyes were always scanning, catching details she might have missed. A broken branch here, a faint footprint there. He read the signs like an open book. When he raised a hand for her to stop, she froze instantly. Ahead, faint shapes moved between the trees. Sarika's ears twitched, catching the sound of armor plates brushing together. It was not their warriors. The human crouched low, gesturing for her to follow. They crept closer until they could see clearly. A small enemy scouting party was moving toward the ridge. There were only 5 of them, but their presence so close to the camp meant trouble. The human studied them for a moment, then glanced at her. She understood without words. They struck quickly. The human moved like a shadow, his weapon flashing with deadly precision. Sarika fought beside him, her spear darting between gaps in the enemy armor. The battle was short, fierce, and silent. When it was over, The 5 scouts lay still among the roots. The humans searched their bodies, finding small signal devices. They were marking positions. He said, "The main force isn't far behind." His tone was steady, but she could see the sharp focus in his eyes. They returned to camp at once, warning the elders and warriors. The news spread quickly, and preparations began. Warriors took their places along the defenses. Archers climbed into the high branches, and the traps were primed. The human walked among them, checking every detail. He offered brief instructions where needed, but most of the time he only gave a nod of approval. His presence alone seemed to steady their nerves. By midday, the sound of drums echoed through the jungle. It was deep, slow, and heavy, like the heartbeat of some enormous beast. The enemy had arrived. Sarika gripped her spear, feeling her pulse quicken. From the shadows beyond the ridge, dark shapes emerged. Hundreds of armored soldiers marched forward, their red eyes glowing through the mist. The human stood at the front line, his weapon in hand. The sight of him there, ready to meet the army, made her heart tighten. The first wave came fast, crashing into the traps they had laid. Hidden pits swallowed soldiers whole, and spiked barriers slowed their charge. Archers rained arrows from above, striking down those who tried to climb. Through it all, the human moved like a force of nature, striking where the line was weakest, cutting down enemies before they could break through. Sarika stayed close, matching his pace, her spear flashing in the light. Together they held the center, but the enemy kept coming. The ground shook with the weight of their advance. Sarika felt the strain in her arms, the burn in her lungs, but she did not falter. The human fought beside her, his focus unbroken. Every time she thought the line might fail, he was there, turning the tide. The battle was far from over, yet she felt a fierce certainty growing inside her. No matter how many came, as long as he stood with them, they would not fall. The enemy's numbers seemed endless. Each time one fell, another stepped forward to take its place. The clash of metal and the roar of battle filled the air. Arrows whistled overhead, finding their marks in the advancing lines. Sarika's arms ached from the constant strikes, but she pushed on. Her focus narrowed to the enemies in front of her, and the human at her side. He moved with precision, each swing of his weapon bringing down another foe. His eyes scanned the battlefield constantly, marking threats before they could strike. When a group tried to flank from the left, he was already there, blocking their path and cutting them down. Sarika realized he was not only fighting, he was guiding the flow of the entire battle. Wherever he went, their forces held strong. A sudden horn blast rose from the enemy's ranks. The soldiers pulled back slightly, forming a wider circle around the center. From that opening, a massive figure stepped forward. Its armor was blackened steel, etched with glowing red lines. The creature carried a heavy blade nearly as long as Sarika was tall. She felt her chest tighten. This was no ordinary warrior. This was one of their champions. The human stepped ahead, his weapon ready. The champion's deep voice boomed across the battlefield, challenging him. Sarika could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. The two fighters circled each other, the sounds of battle fading as nearby warriors paused to watch. Then, without warning, the champion charged. The ground trembled with each step. Their clash was brutal. The champion's strikes were heavy and fast, each one strong enough to crush bone. The human blocked and dodged with perfect timing, his movement smooth and controlled. Sparks flew as their weapons met again and again. Sarika found herself holding her breath, her spear ready if he needed help, but he never faltered. Step by step, he forced the champion back. With a final sharp strike, the human broke through the champion's guard. His weapon struck true, cutting deep into the armor. The massive figure staggered, then fell to the ground. A stunned silence spread across the battlefield. The enemy soldiers looked at their fallen champion, then at the human standing over him. For the first time, Sarika saw doubt in their eyes. The human raised his weapon high, letting the enemy see it clearly. Then he pointed it toward them in challenge. The effect was immediate. Some soldiers roared in anger and charged, while others hesitated. Sarika seized the moment, rallying the warriors near her. Together they surged forward, striking hard and fast. The camp's defenses held, and the enemy's momentum began to break. Hours seemed to pass in a blur. The sun was high now, its light cutting through the thinning mist. The enemy's numbers dwindled as more and more fell or fled into the jungle. The human fought without slowing, his presence a constant anchor in the chaos. Every time Sarika's strength began to fade, she would glance at him and find the will to push harder. Finally, the enemy lines broke completely. What remained of their force scattered into the trees, leaving behind the bodies of the fallen. The battlefield was quiet except for the labored breaths of the warriors. The human stood in the center, his armor streaked with dirt and blood. He lowered his weapon slowly, scanning the field to be sure no threat remained. Sarika walked to his side, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion, but her gaze steady on him. The battlefield lay still in the heavy silence that followed the fight. Smoke rose from scattered fires, curling into the bright afternoon sky. The red-tail warriors moved among the fallen, checking for survivors and gathering the wounded. Sarika's legs felt heavy as she walked, but her senses stayed alert. The human was still standing in the center, scanning the tree line as if expecting another attack. When he finally lowered his weapon, the tension in the camp eased. The elders approached, their faces marked with both exhaustion and relief. One of them bowed deeply. "The Red-Tail clan owes you more than we can repay," he said. The human shook his head, wiping dirt from his armor. "I didn't do it for a debt," he replied. His voice was steady, but there was a weight behind the words that Sarika could not ignore. She followed him as he walked toward the river to clean his weapon. The air was cooler here, and the water ran clear over smooth stones. He knelt, letting the current wash the blood from the blade. Sarika stood beside him, watching the ripples spread across the surface. "You fight as if you've done this 1,000 times, she said. He glanced up briefly. "I have," he answered simply. She wondered what wars he had seen before this one. Back at the camp, the warriors began repairing the damaged defenses. Some worked in silence. Others spoke in low voices about the battle. Sarika helped mend a broken barrier, her mind still on the human. She noticed how the others looked at him when he passed. Warriors who had fought beside him now stood taller, their eyes filled with a new kind of respect. It was clear he had changed something in them. Later, the elders called for a council. The human was invited to sit among them, an honor rarely given to an outsider. They spoke of the enemy's retreat and the possibility of their return. The human listened without interrupting, his gaze fixed on the maps drawn in the dirt. When he finally spoke, his words were clear and direct. "They will come back stronger," he said. "If you wait for them here, you will be surrounded." His warning left the council in thoughtful silence. Sarika found herself agreeing with him. She had seen the enemy's discipline, their ability to adapt. Waiting would be a mistake. After the meeting, she approached him outside the council tent. "If we cannot wait here, where do we go?" she asked. He studied her for a moment before answering. "Somewhere they can't reach easily. Somewhere we choose." There was determination in his voice, and something else, a quiet promise. The next day, preparations began for the move. Warriors gathered supplies, repaired armor, and scouted the paths ahead. The human worked alongside them, lifting heavy loads and helping with the wounded. Sarika noticed that he never ordered anyone to do what he would not do himself. His presence turned the hard work into something almost bearable. Even the younger warriors moved faster when he was near. As the sun dipped low, Sarika found herself walking with him along the camp's edge. The jungle beyond was painted gold by the fading light. "When this is over, will you leave?" she asked. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "When it's truly over, maybe," he said, "but not before." His words carried a finality that made her chest tighten. She realized she had grown used to him being there, and the thought of his absence felt wrong. That night, the camp was quiet except for the steady hum of the jungle. Sarika lay awake, staring at the stars through the gaps in the canopy. She thought of the battles they had fought, and the ones still to come. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard his footsteps as he walked the perimeter, ever watchful. It was then she understood. He was not just protecting her people. He was protecting her. The journey began before dawn. The warriors moved in silence, carrying supplies and guiding the wounded along the narrow jungle paths. Mist hung low, hiding their tracks from above. Sarika walked near the front, her spear in hand, eyes scanning. The shadows. The human was just ahead of her, his steps sure and quiet despite the weight of his armor. Every so often, he would pause to listen, then signal the group forward. They traveled for hours without seeing any sign of the enemy. The only sounds were the calls of distant birds and the rustle of leaves underfoot. The human led them along, routes few had used in years, avoiding open ground and keeping to the cover of thick foliage. Sarika wondered how he knew these paths so well, but she did not ask. Somehow, she felt the answer would be more than just chance. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a deep valley. A narrow river cut through the center, glinting in the sunlight. On the far side, the land rose steeply into cliffs covered with thick vines. The human studied the view, then spoke to the elders. "We set camp here for the night," he said. "Tomorrow we cross to the cliffs." His voice left no room for doubt. The warriors began unpacking and setting up a temporary camp. Sarika joined him as he walked the perimeter. "Why the cliffs?" she asked. He pointed toward the high ground. "Hard to reach, easy to defend. They'll have to come at us one way, and we'll see them coming long before they reach us." His reasoning was sound. She could already imagine the advantage it would give them, but part of her sensed there was more to his choice than just strategy. That night, the warriors lit small fires, careful to keep them hidden from view. The air was cool, and the sounds of the jungle filled the silence between conversations. Sarika sat across from the human, watching the way the flames danced across his armor. He spoke little, but his presence was enough to keep the warriors calm. She wondered if he knew how much his steadiness meant to them. Before the moon was high, a scout returned from the North Trail. His breath came fast as he knelt before the elders. "The enemy is moving," he said. "Hundreds of them. They're following our trail." The human rose to his feet immediately. His eyes narrowed and his jaw tightened. "We move at first light," he said. "But tonight, we prepare for the possibility they find us sooner." His tone carried the weight of someone who had been through such nights before. The camp shifted into quiet action. Traps were set at the approaches, and warriors took watch in pairs. Sarika found herself on the western edge with the human. The jungle beyond was dark, the shadows deep and shifting. "Do you ever get tired of this?" she asked. He did not look away from the tree line. "You don't get tired when people are depending on you," he said. The simplicity of his answer stayed with her. Hours passed without incident. The fires burned low, and the warriors on watch rotated in silence. Just before dawn, a faint sound carried through the air, a steady rhythm, like many feet moving in unison. Sarika tensed, her grip on the spear tightening. The human's gaze locked in the same direction. "They found us," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the readiness in it. He gave quick, clear orders to the nearest warriors. Positions were taken, weapons readied. The first light of morning touched the horizon, casting pale gold through the mist. The enemy emerged from the shadows, their armor gleaming faintly in the dim light. Sarika's heartbeat quickened, but she felt no fear. Not with him standing beside her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The enemy advanced through the mist with slow, deliberate steps. Their numbers filled the valley below, the sound of their march echoing against the ridge. Sarika stood at the front with her spear, her heart steady. The human was beside her, his weapon glowing faintly in the dim light. Around them, the red-tail warriors held their positions, every eye fixed on the approaching force. The first clash came fast. Arrows rained down from the high ground, striking the enemy's front lines. Warriors leapt from hidden spots, forcing them into the trap set the night before. The narrow path up the ridge became a choke point. Just as the human had planned, he moved through the lines, striking with precision, cutting down any who came close. Sarika fought beside him, matching his pace as the battle raged. The enemy pressed harder, sending their strongest fighters up the slope. The air filled with the clash of weapons and the cries of battle. The human's voice rose above the noise, giving sharp commands that shifted their defense wherever it was weakest. Sarika realized they were not simply holding the ridge. They were wearing the enemy down, forcing them into mistakes they could not afford. One of the enemy's captains broke through, charging directly toward the elder's position. Without hesitation, the human moved to intercept. Their weapons met with a clash that rang across the ridge. The fight was brutal, but it ended quickly. The captain fell, and the sight sent a ripple of fear through the enemy ranks. Sarika saw the hesitation in their movements and pressed forward with renewed strength. Hours passed in the chaos of battle. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist. The ground was littered with fallen soldiers, the smell of metal and smoke thick in the air. Yet, the enemy still came. Sarika's muscles ached, but she kept fighting, each strike driven by the presence of the man beside her. She had watched him break an army before, and now she understood. He did it not through strength alone, but through the will he gave to those who fought with him. At last, the enemy's lines wavered. Shouts of retreat carried through their ranks, and the steady flow of fighters up the ridge began to falter. The human stepped forward, raising his weapon high. His voice carried over the battlefield. "Go back and tell them," he said. "You will never take this ground." The word struck deeper than any blade. The enemy began to fall back, their retreat turning into a full withdrawal. The ridge fell silent except for the sound of breathing and the faint rustle of leaves. The red-tail warriors looked at each other, their expressions a mix of disbelief and relief. Sarika let her spear rest against the ground, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. The human walked toward her, his armor dented, his face marked with dirt and sweat, but his eyes steady as ever. When he reached her, she did not speak. She simply stepped forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder. For a moment, the war was far away. Around them, the warriors began to cheer, their voices echoing through the valley. The human placed a hand on her back, steady and certain. In that silent exchange, she knew the truth. He had not just saved her people. He had become part of them. The elders approached, their voices carrying gratitude and promises of honor. But Sarika barely heard them. Her focus was on the man who had stood between them and destruction, who had turned fear into courage. She knew he could leave now if he wished, but a part of her hoped he would stay. And when he looked into her eyes and gave the faintest of nods, she understood that he would, for as long as they needed him.